are listening to pause. We pause for a second or two. This is episode 48, Against or Along the Grain. We are sensitive to the group. We know and feel very well the different directions in which the group wants to go. We are sensitive to hierarchies, all of us. We are everyone sensitive to hierarchies. We always know who's in charge, and we always know who is below and who is above. We know these things on an intuitive level. We know them since we are small, and we will always know them until we grow old. Today's episode is called Against or Along the Grain. And the grain I am referring to could be a number of different grains. But generally I'm speaking about the grain of life. So we are sensitive to the grain between you and me, where our relationship is going. We are sensitive to the grain of the group, where the group seems to be going. We are sensitive to the grain of society, the grain of our country, the grain of technology, the grain of politics. And all of these fall under the general grain of life. And in today's episode, I will speak a bit about the choice we have in all of this. And the choice that we always have is if we want to go against the grain or if we want to go along with the grain. And my argument today is that this choice that we have to go against or along the grain is what makes life interesting. The Polaroid for today's episode, the image, is creativity. And this choice we have of going against or along the grain is one part of this universal skill creativity. Our creativity is universal because it is present in every situation. No matter where we find ourselves in life, we have something in front of us. And we must do something with the thing we have in front of us. We can choose to do nothing, but that is also a choice. And all of this is creativity. And the question of going against or along the grain in a given situation is a part of creativity that is interesting. It makes life interesting. Perhaps all of us have this sort of a self-image. If we are a person who often goes against the grain, or, in contrary, often goes along the grain. We can say things like, I always go my own way. Or we might say, it's best to do like everybody else. So this question, this choice of going against or along the grain is very much related to our sense of identity, who we are, our personality. But I will challenge you today, because sometimes we find ourselves wanting to go against the grain, and at other times we find ourselves wanting to go along with the grain. It's not that easy to have an identity that is always going against or always going along. You are more complex than so. Sometimes we find ourselves doing contrary to what we thought we would do. Sometimes we surprise ourselves of going our own way when we thought we was like everybody else. And sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes we go along with whatever is expected of us when we thought we were more special, or that we had more integrity. Sometimes we disappoint ourselves by being like everybody else. Now we are entering a time for society at large when there is more open conflict. And as there is more open conflict, people are more stressed, and people's nervous systems are more strained. So our decision making is made more difficult. Conflicts make our minds go blank. So, in these times of conflict that we now are entering, we are seeing more and more of people self-organizing into these larger groups, where each individual within the group is going along with the grain, and the group as a whole is going against another grain. So individuals are going along the grain, and groups are going against the grain and clashing. And within this dynamics of group conflict, we as individuals can feel more lost. It can feel scary and overwhelming, that our sense of control over our bodies, over our decision making, can feel lesser than it usually does. For those of us who usually experience a high degree of autonomy, perhaps a high degree of responsibility as well, but definitely a high degree of autonomy. For those of us, this time of group conflict can feel very difficult. Usually, it might be expected of us in times of peace. It might be expected of us to go against the grain as individuals, to sort of give the group a sense of dynamics, a sense of contrasting perspective. But in these times, when groups are clashing, and when individuals to a higher degree are expected to go along the grain, this will present us with a new set of difficulties, a new set of dilemmas. We are in the initial phases of these times of group conflicts. We are still in the initial phases. So it is only natural for us to still be quite confused about when to go against the grain and how to go against the grain. It is always challenging in the beginning of changing times to know how we should adjust. We will always be confused in the beginning of a new phase, in the beginning of new times. So, one part of creativity in these new times is to be more graceful in how we sort of hold ourselves. We need to be patient with ourselves. We will acclimate to these new times. We will grow used to these times of group conflict. In this last part of today's episode, I will speak about how pausing relates to our choice of going against or along the grain. Sometimes we can try out when we find ourselves in a situation, might be any situation, that we just feel that now is a good idea to just pause for a while. Just pause and observe what is going on. And as we pause and observe what is going on, we can see the grain, we can see motion around us, how there are these patterns and constellations unfolding in real time, both outside of us and inside of us. And it's almost like when we swim in the ocean and we can feel the waves sort of moving our body here and there. And we can observe the water, we can observe our own body, we can observe how our body is moved here and there by the motion, the invisible motion in the water. And going along with the grain is a lot about just letting the waves move us. And we do not know where, but we will be moved somewhere. And going against the grain, as we have paused for a while, if we choose to go against the grain, that it feels right, it feels interesting to try to go against the grain, that would be us swimming. And as we swim, we can feel that the force of our own body is crashing against the waves. And as we go against the grain, as we swim against the waves, we cannot help but feel alive. We feel at our most aliveness when we go against the grain and feel the force of the waves against our bodies. And if we do this, if we pause every now and again, then we will in time appreciate both going along with the grain and against the grain. Because going along with the grain and against the grain feels differently. So we are focused on our experience of living. And as we are focused on our experience of living, letting the waves take us wherever they want, or swimming against the waves, as we are focused on those experiences of ours, we are not spending time with anxiety, we are not spending time with despair, we are not spending time with helplessness. And I think that's one way to put the phrase, to live our lives. Pausing is central to really experiencing our lives, even in the midst of turmoil and group conflict. That's it for today. Thank you.